On the ether's edge, the old yet incredibly powerful warship that maintained itself, Zaliq sat quietly in his cabin, gazing out of the window. The vast expanse of space stretched before him, engulfed in cold darkness, occasionally illuminated only by distant stars flickering like uncertain pinpricks of light. The ether's edge drifted slowly through the stars, like a colossal monster silently crossing the universe, producing faint screeching sounds as its hull scraped against the weightless void of space. This was a peculiar ship, powered by old yet unique technologies beyond the comprehension of many alien species. Everything on the ship ran on a self-sustaining system. As long as energy and oxygen remained, the ship would keep flying. Zaliq, a warrior of the Xyra species, a race of three-eyed beings with blazing red skin and extraordinary strength, had long been part of a space crew made up mostly of humans. His wounds had not yet healed. Deep gashes across his body still bled, making it impossible for him to move normally. His body remained heavy and painful after the bloody battle with alien creatures that he and his human comrades had faced. It had been a battle with massive alien beings for no apparent reason, just the senseless attack of an alien force whose motives no one understood. They attacked simply because they were powerful creatures, indifferent to the lives or deaths of others. These monsters could survive in conditions unimaginable to other beings, and they attacked without discrimination or mercy. Zaliq remembered the final moments of the battle when he was wounded and nearly unable to continue fighting. His injuries made it hard to breathe, and as he collapsed to the ground, there was only one thing on his mind: how to survive. Then, as if by a miracle, he was saved. But life was not easy, and salvation did not come as he had hoped. After Zaliq was brought back to the ether's edge to recover, he received a message from his superiors, instructing him to return to his homeland, not for rest or healing, but to teach at the Arcadia Military Academy, the very place that had previously rejected him. This made Zaliq feel frustrated and angry. He had no desire to return home after enduring so much loss and injury in the war. However, the decision of his superiors was final. They ordered him to return to his homeland and teach the younger generation of the Xyra people, those who had never experienced war as he had. He was to impart his experiences of warfare, the alien creatures humanity was facing, and how they could survive in a universe filled with dangers. He couldn't understand why he was entrusted with this responsibility when his wounds were still not healed, and his mind was torn between his frustration and the memories of being a warrior. And so, during the long nights, Zaliq gazed up at the mysterious sky, as if in his heart, an unanswerable question repeated itself over and over. Can humanity truly understand the harshness of life in space? Can they continue to fight and survive when faced with invisible threats and alien forces they cannot control? Zaliq felt as though he stood between two worlds, one filled with unchangeable victories and defeats, and another full of hope and anticipation. When Zaliq walked into the Arcadia Military Academy, he couldn't help but feel out of place. The shiny metal walls, the rows of modern classrooms lit by dim LED lights, and the tense atmosphere of a place where everything had to be measured and calculated. The young students, their bright eyes full of curiosity, looked at him with respect. He could feel their admiration, but also a sense of alienation. How could they understand what he had been through? How could they comprehend the battles he had faced and the pain he had endured? Zaliq began teaching about humanity and life in space. He spoke of the fierce battles he had participated in, the strange alien creatures, and the advanced technologies humanity had developed. He particularly emphasized the resilience of humans in harsh environments and their ability to survive. He also told stories of space exploration, where humans had discovered creatures capable of surviving in conditions that no other life forms could endure. This made Zaliq feel confused, and one question kept appearing in his mind. How can humans survive in such a dangerous universe, filled with terrifying creatures like that? In the vast space of the classroom, Zaliq stood among the young students, their curious eyes fixed on him, as if he were an alien creature full of mystery. Although his appearance, with his fiery red skin and three-dimensional eyes resembling tracking sensors, was no longer unfamiliar to them, there remained an inexplicable allure, making every word he spoke resonate with admiration. He began his story, his voice deep and mysterious, reverberating like a sound from the depths of the universe, where light could never reach. Life in space is not always easy, Zaliq began, his gaze piercing through the transparent window of the classroom, as though he was looking into the distant memories of his own past. Humanity has faced incredibly dangerous alien creatures, battles that can never be predicted, where life is a fragile thread. He recounted his first encounter with the gigantic creatures from a distant planet, beings with terrifying strength that no conventional weapon could stop. These colossal monsters possessed natural armor as hard as steel, massive bodies, and the ability to rapidly regenerate from wounds. They are not just monsters from unexplored planets, Zaliq said, his voice tinged with obsession. They are symbols of brutal unpredictability, and they can regenerate endlessly. Once you face them, you are never sure you will survive. Zaliq shifted to another story, one about clashes with those who called themselves the Emperors of the Universe, ambitious beings seeking to conquer the entire galaxy. These confrontations were not just weapon battles, but brutal intellectual duels, where every wrong decision could lead to death. Zaliq described each detail of those struggles, from the waves of light flashing through space to the explosive sounds that made the very fabric of space seem to shatter. Once you face such beings, Zaliq continued, you don't just fight with weapons, you fight with your mind. Strategy and thinking are key. These battles are not only a confrontation between lives, but a clash of ideologies. These so-called emperors constantly seek brutal methods to win. But humanity, with its strange strength and smart strategies, always finds a way to overcome them. Every word Zaliq spoke not only recounted past battles, but also served as a lesson in resilience. He spoke of how humanity, despite being so small in the vast universe, possessed extraordinary strength, not just through muscle power, but also through their ability to adapt to the harsh conditions of space. Humans, Zaliq said, can survive in environments that we, powerful creatures, cannot even imagine. They can endure temperatures so cold they could freeze any other living creature, or unbearable heat. They can survive in conditions that would obliterate others. A student nearby, a girl with bright, curious eyes, asked, "How do humans do that? What kind of technology helps them survive?" Zaliq smiled slightly. That's an interesting question. Humans don't just have technology to help them survive. They've developed incredibly clever tools. One of the most obvious examples is their medical technologies. Zaliq continued to explain how humans developed advanced medical technologies, such as specialized sprays to stop bleeding and keep blood within the body in dangerous situations. He recalled a battle where these medical devices saved his life when a monster mauled him, causing serious wounds. Humans never stop creating, and in each step they take, there's preparation for every possibility. They don't just rely on physical strength, but also use their intellect to solve problems we can't even imagine. Zaliq paused, his gaze deep. They have developed automated systems that can regulate the temperature of their living environments, ensuring their bodies are always safe. They can create food and water without needing resources from outer space. He looked at the students listening intently, seeing the admiration in their eyes. With these technologies, humans can not only survive in space, but they can also travel to places where other life forms would never think to go. They can survive and even create life in a universe that is vast and filled with dangers. Zaliq ended his lecture with a big question, a question that he himself had been asking throughout his journey. With such power, can humanity change this universe? Can they help us understand that in this universe, life is not easy, but it can surpass all limits if we know how to survive and fight for it? The classroom fell silent, contemplating Zaliq's question. His story was not just about battles and resilience, but a reminder of humanity's ability to adapt and survive in a universe filled with mystery and danger. The tension in the classroom grew as Zaliq began to share one of the most brutal battles he fought alongside humans. His 3 eyes suddenly darkened, as though he were looking into the dark memories that had haunted his mind for so long. His voice, powerful yet tinged with a shadow, echoed, each word cutting into the space of the classroom. In a battle we could not predict, we faced a colossal creature, a monster no one could have ever imagined. Its size was so enormous that even a warship could not contend with it. It had a shell as hard as steel, eyes like glowing emeralds, and claws long and sharp as razors. Zaliq paused, his eyes sweeping across the students before he continued. Its brutality was indescribable. Just one swipe of its claws could send warriors and ships flying, shattering even the most resilient materials. But the strangest thing was when I was injured. One of its claws pierced through my armor, slicing a long wound from my shoulder to my abdomen, causing blood to pour out uncontrollably. I fell, unable to rise. Zaliq took a deep breath, the cold feeling of that moment still gripping his body as he recalled it. I didn't think I could survive that attack. But humans, they are not like other species. They don't just fight with weapons, but with their minds and creativity. After I fell, I was taken aboard a human medical ship, and that's when I couldn't help but be amazed. Their medical methods, the miraculous technologies I had never seen before, saved my life. Automated devices connected to my body, adjusting the blood flow, pumping biological material into my wounds to heal the damage. Tiny pills were sprayed into my body, immediately stimulating cell growth and healing the wounds in a miraculous way. Zaliq paused to allow the students time to imagine what he had just described. If it had been any other injury, I would have died. But humans, they don't just have advanced treatment methods. They can control pain, making the body fight against itself. After a short time, I was able to stand up, even continue fighting, despite the wounds still being fresh. Zaliq shook his head, his eyes filled with respect. This was not just a miracle, but an unbelievable resilience of humans. They can survive wounds that seem beyond healing and then fight again. He continued with a story about a human soldier in their crew, one who had dislocated his knee in battle, a trauma that would have left most other species unable to stand. But instead of collapsing, this soldier, despite the pain, was treated right there on the battlefield. They don't just use medical methods to heal, but they have ways to push the limits of the body. Even in the harshest situations, they can keep fighting as if nothing happened. Zaliq remembered that detail from the battle, when the human soldier, despite his dislocated knee, stood up and continued fighting with a determination that any Xyra warrior would admire. It felt so strange, Zaliq continued, when I witnessed that. How could a species, not the strongest of all, possess such overwhelming mental strength? He stopped, his gaze now seeming to pierce through the transparent window of the classroom, looking into the vast, dark universe beyond. Humans don't just have physical strength, they have an extraordinary mental strength. They can survive in the harshest environments, endure pain that many other species couldn't bear, and most importantly, they have the ability to persevere until the very end. Zaliq turned back, looking at each face in the classroom. That is the true strength of humanity, not in weapons, not in strategies, but in their ability to never give up. That's why they can overcome any challenge and continue to fight for their survival, no matter how difficult the circumstances may be. Zaliq stood in the classroom, a heavy feeling weighing down his chest. The students, their eyes bright with curiosity, listened intently as he spoke about the brutal battles, the alien creatures humanity had fought and defeated. Although his stories made the air in the room feel suffocating, it was a question from a student that unexpectedly made Zaliq pause. A young student, his eyes filled with curiosity, hesitantly raised his hand. "Sir, if humanity has been able to face and defeat alien species, can they stand strong when faced with enemies they cannot see? Enemies that are invisible, like something within their own minds?" The question caught Zaliq off guard, and he paused, unsure how to answer. He gazed at the student's face, a strange feeling rising within him. Perhaps this was something he had never thought of. In that moment, an indistinct image flashed through Zaliq's mind. A strange creature, captured and brought to the academy for study. This creature was unlike anything he had encountered in his battles. It had no clear body, no defined shape, only a vague form of light, sometimes appearing as streaks of bright blue energy, only to dissolve into the air as if it had never existed. These creatures, which Zaliq could not name, possessed a unique ability that no other life form in the universe had. They could control and use technology far more advanced than any species had ever imagined. The devices they wielded were not tools of war, not weapons of destruction or annihilation. Instead, they were technologies for protection, safeguarding humanity from dangers even the most powerful beings could not conceive. Zaliq recalled the first time he encountered one of these creatures. They did not speak, but there was something in their shimmering light that made Zaliq feel as though he was facing an entity with profound knowledge of the universe, of life and death. They didn't come to fight. They came to prevent a disaster that was looming over humanity. The student's question was not a random one. It was a warning about a truth Zaliq had never considered. If these creatures could protect humanity from extraterrestrial dangers, could they also help humanity combat the invisible threats, the threats that came from within themselves? These creatures, they are unlike any species I have ever encountered, Zaliq began, his voice growing deep and mysterious. They don't just have superior technology, but they possess the ability to understand the hidden dangers that we cannot perceive. They don't use their technology to attack, but to protect. Perhaps they see something in us that we cannot comprehend. Zaliq paused, his eyes drifting off into the vast emptiness. Can humanity overcome invisible enemies? Enemies that cannot be seen, but can destroy everything we have built? This question is not easy to answer, but one thing I know for sure. Humanity is not a weak species. Even when faced with invisible threats, they can find a way to overcome them. They will find a way. Zaliq looked at the students, seeing the bright glint in their eyes and the unspoken questions in their gazes. He knew that this question was not just from that one student, but from all of them, from every living being in the universe. And the answer did not lie in technology or physical strength, but in each individual person, in their ability to see what no one else could. The atmosphere in the command room of the Ether's Edge was taut as a bowstring, filled with the silence before the storm. Zaliq stood there, his three eyes intently focused on the display screen. Before him lay a terrifying sight, a massive cloud of warships heading straight for them, with blue beams of light flashing from their destructive weapons. Opposite him, alien ships with bizarre designs loomed, looking as if they were born from nightmares. Their massive wings stretched out like monstrous appendages, and red beams of laser light shot out, striking the Ether's Edge, shaking the ship with every hit, as though it were being hurled into a ferocious storm. "We can't hold out much longer," Captain Riley's voice crackled in Zaliq's earpiece. His face was grim, eyes sharp as he followed the battlefield on the display. "If we don't act now, we'll be destroyed. The decisions we make now will determine our survival." Zaliq took a deep breath, feeling the tension of space pressing down on him. Death could be lurking right in front of him, but he wouldn't allow himself to show weakness. He had fought many battles, but this time felt different. These alien ships were not only militarily powerful, but possessed a terrifying brutality. What worried Zaliq even more was humanity's weakness. They could fight, but did they have the strength to face such a destructive force? We could initiate the ship's self-destruct sequence to slow them down, or... Zaliq hesitated, his eyes drifting toward the team of humans working tirelessly. Or we could find a way to use all our technology to fight back. But do we have enough time to make it work? Everything seemed to freeze in the air. The alien ships kept firing, their laser beams tearing into the Ether's Edge, causing sections of the ship to explode. One massive piece of debris whizzed by, nearly grazing Zaliq's face, as if it were a warning. Zaliq's face darkened. He couldn't stop thinking about the immense consequences that every decision would bring. "We will have to sacrifice," one of the human officers said, his voice tense. "We can't keep the ship intact, but if we sacrifice part of the ship, maybe we can create a weak point that will disable their attack." Zaliq looked at the screen, watching as the alien ships slowed down, seemingly preparing for a final full-scale assault. He could feel their power, the weight of both life and death resting in his hands. How could he make the right decision now? Was sacrificing part of the ship the only way to save the rest of the crew? Or was there another way, one he hadn't considered? He couldn't help but think about everything he had learned about humanity over the past months. They were unlike any species he had encountered. Humans, with their resilience and determination, could overcome challenges that seemed impossible. Zaliq thought back to previous encounters, when humanity had faced and defeated powerful alien forces. Enemies not only strong in weaponry, but also brutally destructive beyond imagination. Yet, they had fought and won. Could this be the moment when humanity would prove its strength once again? "Captain Riley," I propose we use all available energy to optimize our defenses and deploy the team to reinforce the ship's weakest areas, Zaliq said, his voice resolute. We cannot give up. Even in the face of danger, we must fight. Every decision today will determine not only the survival of the Aether's Edge, but the survival of humanity. A moment of silence filled the command room. Everyone understood that what Zaliq had just said was not just empty encouragement. This was a matter of life and death, where every second could decide the fate of thousands of lives. They might sacrifice, but if they did, all hope would be lost. A new life, a civilization, might never have the chance to be born if they didn't stand strong in this moment. Zaliq stood up and turned to the human soldiers and his crew, looking into their eyes. Determined gazes, hands ready to grasp their weapons. Everyone understood that this was the battle that would determine their fate. Despite the sacrifices, despite the potential losses, they would fight for a future, for humanity. Zaliq knew one thing for certain. There was no victory without cost. But the most important thing was never to give up. Humanity had fought to survive, and they would fight to protect what they had built. And so, the final decision was made. Zaliq and the human crew began fighting with all their remaining strength. The door to the future was opening, but would they survive to step through it? Zaliq stood there, on the deck of the Aether's Edge, his three eyes fixed on the vast expanse of space before him, where the stars shimmered like tiny pinpricks of light against the immense dark canvas. The universe in front of him was so vast it was beyond measure, filled with unsolved mysteries and dangers that could not be predicted. He couldn't help but feel a slight tremor in his mind as he thought about the journey that had brought him here, about the victories, the sacrifices, and the decisions each member of his crew had to face in this life and death battle. In the quiet of space, with only the hum of the ship's engines, Zaliq felt small against the immense world of the universe, where greater forces waited to test them. He wondered, not for the first time, whether humanity could truly continue to evolve and protect their existence, or if they would ultimately be swept away by the wrong decisions they had made. He had witnessed brutal moments, painful sacrifices, and endless battles, but he had also seen the remarkable resilience of humans. Could they overcome the terrifying challenges that awaited them in this endless universe? Would humanity stand firm in the fight, not just against alien creatures, but against themselves, against invisible fears, tough decisions, and choices that could alter the fate of all mankind? Zaliq raised his hand to shield his three eyes, as if trying to see something out in that distant space, a sign, an answer, or simply some comfort in a time when all he had were unanswered questions. He remembered the battle with alien creatures, the decisions he and his team had made in moments of life or death. But now, as he stood in the vastness of space, did those battles still matter? Could humanity continue to stand firm against new dangers, threats they had never even imagined? These questions had no answers. And perhaps, that was what made them even more terrifying than any weapon. Zaliq couldn't help but think about humanity, about their ability to always find a way to overcome the seemingly impossible. He remembered the times when humans had dared to stand up against superior forces. When faced with death, they still refused to surrender. And that was the strength Zaliq had never seen in any other species. He didn't know whether humanity would solve the enormous cosmic problems they were facing. But one thing he was certain of, they would not be easily defeated. Humans had the ability to adapt, to face death squarely, and still find a way to survive. They were not perfect beings, but it was in their imperfection that they displayed extraordinary mental strength. Zaliq looked up at the dark sky, his eyes seeming to pierce through the stars, toward a future full of doubt and hope. He wondered, will alien creatures completely destroy humanity's civilization, or will humans be the last ones standing in the endless cosmic storm? A gentle breeze blew, carrying a sense of stillness and strangeness. Zaliq couldn't see clearly what lay ahead, but one thing he felt clearly was this: no matter the trials ahead, humanity would not give up. They would fight until the last moment to protect what they had built, to survive and continue to evolve. And it was this resilience, an unseen force, that would keep humanity alive in this vast and dangerous universe. But would all that humanity had done be enough to overcome the invisible forces, or would they face the unknown, choices that could not be undone? Zaliq had no answers, only the vast universe before him, like a mirror reflecting all the questions that he and humanity had to face.